He asked, so when a girl has her period, she just lays an egg in the toilet. Right? Ask Reddit on Reddit Rundown. What is your sex ed horror story? 6th grade sext. At the end of the class, the teacher opened the floor for questions. She said we could ask anything as long as it was a serious question. The only question I remember is when a kid, male, asked, "It's okay to have sex with your sister, right?" The teacher stared at him for what felt like a minute and said no. Somebody replied, "Haha, I asked what oral sex was and my teacher said, you know what sex is? You know what oral means? Figure it out." I did not figure it out. I thought oral only meant oral presentation as in speaking and figured it was sex where you talked a lot. Somebody else replied, "That's how you get hearing aids." My sex ed teacher brought a kid up to the front of the classroom wearing a shirt that had 2 long sleeves and explained what an uncircumcised penis looked like. In 6th grade I learned the term popping your cherry from some friends in sex ed class. I went home with this newly found knowledge and accused my older sister of having her cherry popped. She broke out in tears and my mom grounded me for a week. 9th grade health with Mr. Lamb. Dude was an absolute gem of a human being. But his voice sounded exactly like Barry White. Like all the time. So, anytime he tried to say anything remotely sexual, it sounded like the voiceover for a raunchy R&B song. Which made the freshmen erupt in laughter? Constantly. Poor guy just couldn't get through a lesson for 3 straight weeks. One kid in my class asked if you could get STDs from having sex with a chicken. Kind of put him on the spot and was a little suspicious. The only thing I remember from sex ed which was taught by the creepy lunch lady. Lunch lady unrolls a condom and stretches it as far as she could. Then she says, "I know none of you are this big, so this will fit any of you." Somebody replied. My health teacher stuck her foot in an XL condom and pulled it halfway up her shin and then stared at the class and said, "If a guy ever tells any of you he's too big for condoms, you run as fast and as far as you can away from that." More of a lack of sex ed horror story, and thankfully short. A guy who I had a crush on, both of us seniors, pulled me aside one day and asks, "So when a girl has her period, she just lays an egg in the toilet, right?" I'll be honest. I'm not sure if I answered him or just stared at him. Unintentional sex ed happened for me in 4th grade. In an assignment we had to invent a new town relating to the gold rush. I named it K-porn, and I thought I just made a new word, did not know what porn was. My imagination sucks and the town name was similar to a name I recently heard, K-porn. We had to give a reason for the name and my unimaginative mind said they didn't know why. A teacher-parent conference later I was confused why they were asking me about the word porn and if I knew what it meant. Zero explanation on their end. So, curiosity hits me and I Google porn. That's how my 4th grade teacher introduced me to online pornography and wanking. 2 interns were teaching us, 7th grade, about HIV. Interns, so, you can catch it by oral, vaginal and anal sex. That guy in the back, what about nasal sex? Everybody, shut up, Diego. Interns, well, the worst that could happen is dying by asphyxiation. Story from my mom, she taught a middle school special ed class. Her and a male colleague handled sex ed. Her first year on the job, they passed around a box so that students could write questions anonymously. The male teacher pulled a question and said he couldn't answer. Mom, wanting to be helpful, asked if it was a female question. The male teacher tried to warn her. The question was, what does cum taste like? My mom was so dedicated to educating these kids that she launched into a hypothetical discussion about how most body fluids have a high salt content, so it might take salty. The boy who wrote the question could not contain himself and blurted, "My girlfriend said it tastes like gummy bears." My mother never ate a gummy bear again. Teacher hit a girl in the face with a dildo. We did not learn how to put on condoms that year. Somebody replied. Come again? The school had a briefcase of mounted dildos so that every health class could learn how to put on condoms. It was kept under lock and key obviously and was an object of great interest to the student body, so when we got to class and saw the case on the teacher's desk, we knew what was up. The teacher was 100% a nightmare and very nasty to students. So, he's talking about the importance of condoms and he takes one of these mounted dildos out and sets it on this one girl's desk. This girl was pretty sheltered/naive and you could tell she was terribly uncomfortable having this thing on her desk. So, the teacher picks it up and starts waving it in her face while asking her if she was uncomfortable, while she just sat there in silent horror. He started waving it more aggressively and then bam, right on the face. The girl screams and the teacher immediately ran to throw the thing back in the case. Case locked up and put behind the desk. No more talk of condoms for the rest of the year. Somebody replied, "What a dick move." Being singled out by the teacher because I had a unique name for a scenario, along with a boy who I didn't like. She used our names in a scenario talking about how our relationship develops. We had to stand in front of the class while she described random scenarios where we might end up having unprotected sex, and why it was bad. I was not attracted to this boy, and I'm sure he wasn't attracted to me either. Hearing her talking about us having sex was nightmarish. Somebody replied, "In law school we were taking up property law the other day, and there was this one section about how the owner of a pregnant animal will automatically be the owner of its offspring. For example, if you borrow my horse, and it gives birth, you must return both the original horse and the foal." One guy was instructed to come up with a situation about sheep breeding, and had to use the names of his classmates. The professor intended for the names to belong to the metaphorical farmers, but the guy mistakenly ended up using them for the sheep and was on the verge of basically describing two girls in class breeding with each other. Not really a horror story, rather a hilarious one. Catholic school sex ed and they break up girls and guys into two rooms. A nun teaching the girls and a priest teaching the boys. Honestly, probably more informative than my friends who went to public school, taught us about abstinence as well as condoms and whatnot. Anyways, the priest talks to us about masturbation and I'll never forget his line. Masturbation is perfectly normal. In fact, 95% of men admit to doing it one time or the other. The other 5% are liars. It was taught by a Jesuit monk whose English language skill were Latin, and by the end, one-hour class, total, I sometimes couldn't even identify which sex the diagrams were showing. It was all line diagrams. All medical terms. Father Bartoli thought it went well, anyway. My friend's mom bought a sexual reproductive pop-up book. It covered both male and female. So, you would open it up and the uterus and fallopian tubes would pop up at your face. You can only imagine the fun we had with that. Somebody replied, "Is that an open sex ed pop-up book in your pants, or are you happy to see me?" We played STD in a cup. Everyone gets a cup of water. One cup of water has a bunch of dissolved starch in it, the STD. We went around swapping fluids to represent sex, and we're supposed to see if we could safely avoid STDs without protection, swapping fluids. At the end, we find out who had the STD by dropping iodine into each cup, turning the starch blue. If it turned blue, you tested positive. Everyone in the class ended up with the STD, even me, because even though I only had one partner, and they had only had one before me, the one before them was a sloat and had everybody's fluids. Honestly, a very good exercise and warning. Except for that one kid. At the end, he dumped his test results and refilled his cup at the bubbler in order to claim he didn't have the STD, and he was good for more fluid swapping. Honestly, another good lesson on assholes who will lie about being clean. Use protection, kids. Well, I didn't think it was a horror story, but it stunned a few people. When I was 5 and my sister was 6, we had a fish tank. One of the fish we had was a pregnant Molly we liked quite a bit. Unfortunately, she died before giving birth. So, my sister, curious creature she is, asked our aunt, a trauma nurse who worked on life flight with a passion for teaching, if we could cut open the fish and save the babies. This would eventually lead first to my aunt dissecting the fish for us, then to her explaining reproduction, and ended with a rudimentary version of the talk. My aunt would take every chance she got to have a very graphic and factual discussion about sex and reproduction, so we would always be armed with knowledge and never have anything unknown. But it was in hindsight a bizarre way to get educated on the birds and the bees. Catholic middle school. In 8th grade they made us watch a video that was basically don't have sex or you'll die. The woman speaking in the video literally said she could tell if a girl has had sex or not by looking into her eyes and gazing into her spirit. Aside from basic biology and anatomy, that was the only formal sex ed that I received in school. That's horrifying. A friend of mine almost started puking during sex ed when we were watching a movie about childbirth in class. It wasn't very explicit, but the blood was enough to get him as pale as the wall. Poor dude. Somebody replied. In high school biology, we wound up on the subject of sex ed and childbirth. The teacher was astonished we had never been shown a video of birth before. Most of us had gone to a small, rural country school outside of town, and sex ed was the high school nurse coming in and giving us pamphlets and worksheets and talking STDs and periods, but not much about sex or pregnancy. She showed us a video the next day. One of the boys sitting by me I had known since 3rd grade, and he was positively green by the end of the video. I wanted to reach out and check on him when I realized the poor guy was boxed in by girls. We watched a video that tried to be hip and cool about sex ed and puberty. Direct quote, "During puberty, a woman's hips and breasts grow." Insert poorly done animation of a girl's hips and breasts enlarging to ridiculous sizes. No, not that big. A horror story in terms of education. In grade 9, we were given a paper that had an equation that said having safe, protected sex was equal to Satan. It went, condoms and birth control lead to premarital sex and sex without the intention of procreation. Premarital sex and sex without the intent to have children is a sin. Choosing to be sinful is the job of Satan. Condoms equals Satan. Needless to say, we had a lot of pregnant girls in our graduating year. 9th grade sex ed, teacher got a wooden penis to show how to put on a condom and the condom ripped in front of everyone. And our teacher said, "In my 27 years of living, I have never seen a condom rip," and someone in the back of class said, "Damn, teacher be getting hella bitches," and he legit laughed nervously. My health teacher in high school told us condoms are strong and they are very stretchy. Don't believe any guy who goes "I'm too big, it won't fit all this or it's just gonna break anyways, why bother putting one on?" She then produced 3 condoms available for pickup in the health office, proceeded to pull one over her hand and up past her elbow on her arm like it was a fancy costume glove, spread her fingers out as wide as they can go, stretched 2 remaining of said condoms over her cowboy boots, and walked around non-stop for over 6 hours before one of them broke. Not necessarily a horror story, but that shit will haunt my dreams forever. Lamau. Not necessarily sex ed, but I worked with a couple who was dating and they didn't think they'd get pregnant because they didn't want to. For context, these are uber religious types, but apparently not religious enough lol, who assumed that God wanted them to be happy and wouldn't give them a child until after they were married. Ha! So, they have a kid now. When I was in 3rd grade, I convinced a bunch of my friends to ask "When can I bust a fat nut just like that?" on an index card. The questions were anonymous, so the teacher pulled about 4 index cards that just said "When can I bust a fat nut?" in a row. Oh man, here we go. Sex ed junior year of high school. One of the days I was sick, like really sick. So instead of going to class I went to the nurse because I felt like I was gonna puke. Nurse told me that I had to get a pass from the teacher of the class I'm about to go to and come back. Which was stupid. So, I was like, fuck that nurse, I'll just go to class if they won't help me feel better. So, I'm in class and it's of course the day of the STD slideshow where they show us the most extreme untreated pictures of STDs to try and scare us into not wanting to have sex. Surprised they were even allowed to show it in our conservative community, so, there I sit, crammed in with a bunch of other students, since they combined 2 health classes at once for this. I'm nowhere near the door. And I feel it. I am going to puke. Fuck. I don't want to puke in front of everyone, especially during the STD slideshow. I try to power through it. Nope, not working. I let out a series of super loud retches, but to my surprise, I don't actually puke. I did it. Now I am merely the kid who dry heaved during the STD slideshow, not the one that puked all over the floor and other students. Still was embarrassing as hell though. The embarrassing story of how I learned what a condom was. When I was about 8 years old, I was at home bored one day. I decided to take a look at this pocket knife my parents had bought as a thank you gift for one of the people at the after-school program I was at. I opened up the tools one by one to check them out, and when I got to the knife, I wasn't paying attention and ended up closing it on my thumb. At first, I thought it was nothing, but then blood started pouring out and I realized it was a bad cut and started to panic. I ran to the bathroom and started screaming for my dad, who was outside working on the car. I ran water over my thumb, but the blood just kept coming and coming. Eventually my dad came, calmed me down, and had me put pressure on it. It was a pretty deep cut, but he didn't think I needed to go to the hospital. By the time my mom got back, everything was okay and I was just a little shaken. She bandaged me up really well and then went to Walgreens for something. When she came back, she had a box of finger cots, which I had never seen before. She put one on my thumb and told me it would help me heal faster by keeping the bandage in place. She had me wear it to school the next day and I was all ready to tell my classmates about how crazy the cut was and how badly I was bleeding, thinking they would find it cool. I was young and had no idea what a condom was or even what it was used for, so I was very naive. However, the kids that liked to bully me weren't, and soon as they saw my thumb they screamed out, "Edgar's got a condom on his finger." Either everyone but me knew what a condom was, or people were just going along with it because the entire class started laughing at me. I was so embarrassed, I ran to the bathroom crying and ripped off the finger cot. When I got home that night, I asked my mom why she would do that to me, and her excuse was that she didn't think anyone would even know what a condom was and it was going to help me heal faster. She didn't make me wear it to school again, but the damage was already done and I was made fun of that for a while. Thanks for listening to Reddit Rundown. Give a thumbs up and subscribe, and help me get to 1,000 subs. Leave a comment below on what kind of topics or stories you would like to hear. You can also check out other videos on my channel. Thanks and have an awesome day.